Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Alan.
And you are officially tuned in to the GG Dispatch. Each week on Tuesday, bright and early, we consolidate the week's biggest headlines in gaming news. Whether you're listening in on your commute, during your workout, or you just have us on in the background, we want to thank you for listening in. And speaking of thanks, another thank you to the kind folks at Audio Technica for providing the microphones that both Alan and I are using, the AT2020 USB-X. Whether you're just starting out on your content creator journey or you're a seasoned pro, Audio Technica has the products for you. Kind of a big weekend this past weekend. My brother graduated from college.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, got his business degree. Now he's not like a 22-year-old kid. He's he's in his 30s. But he's been working full time. He's been taking classes and stuff. And so, you know, Dad came to town and we went and we got brunch and then we went and got dinner at this cool dumpling house. And so my Saturday was like packed full with like social obligations. And then Sunday tried to have some downtime, knock out the usual chores, get some more game time in with some games I'll chat about here in a second. But so pretty busy weekend over here. What about yourself, Alan? What were you up to this weekend?
Just dealing with some networking issues. My router, the WAN port on it went out, and so it was like a hassle to try to like figure out how to get a hold of one because it's such a niche thing that like no store locally even carries it. You kind of just have to rely on the internet, internet shopping for a company
Yeah.
to get to you efficiently, and that sucks. I think we've kind of lost a lot with that recently. Of like, you can't just go like, oh, I need this thing and I need it to get in the next hour. You just have to hope that Amazon can deliver, I guess, really fast.
Yeah, or sometimes Target or maybe a Best Buy if you have one nearby, but there's definitely not that feeling of like having the Fry's Electronics that has all the gadgets and gizmos and doodads and parts that you could possibly need.
I wish we had a micro center here. We do not.
Oh yeah, that too. Throwback, but yeah, it is a bummer because sort of what you do have right left in the tech sections of a lot of these stores is painted in such very broad strokes. Like you have the top line companies for a lot of things are like the most manufactured and distributed, but not necessarily the variety that you would want to get a really good product for whatever your use case is, right? So that can definitely be frustrating. So well, cool. Like I mentioned, I was playing some a handful of new indie titles over the past few days. I still have Stellar Blade on the back burner. I got to dive into that, as well as Hades 2. I really want to dig in there as well. But the games I spent a lot of time with over the last few days were Animal Well and Crow Country. Crow Country, firstly, because I played that one a little bit less. Quite a bit less actually. This one is super cool. I really dig it. It's a survival horror title with kind of PS1 level graphics. It controls and moves a lot like kind of like the original Resident Evil. Turning around manually and aiming and that sort of thing, quick turns, etc. And it's got a really cool kind of spooky vibe. It's a very tight game. Like it's very, controlled. And it's funny because you see a lot of discourse on Twitter, especially in indie game dev Twitter, where it's like, don't make your first video game an open world MMO, right? Like it's sort of like a meme, but it is the problem of indie devs taking on huge projects for their first video game. Crow Country stands out to me as the perfect like example of what your first game should be. Like it's like 4 to 6 hours of playtime. It's got its message. It's got a great aesthetic. It's all that good stuff. And so I'm just really, I've had a great time with it, and you know, I hope other people will check it out too. I've already seen folks have been digging into it and giving it really positive reviews on Steam, but um, yeah, it's super awesome. Are you I forget. We probably talked about this before. Are you big on like the Resident Evil series? Is survival horror kind of your jam or no?
It's in my backlog. I ended up buying they had like a double pack of like the remake of 2 and 3 for like $10 on PSN. But yeah, my PS5 is donezo now, so haven't been able to play it. It is something I want to play though myself.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. So definitely, if you're a fan of Resident Evil, definitely check out Crow Country. Great stuff.
And I want to note that like this past week, it seems like indie devs were having just a really good week. Like I was seeing so many like video game journalists that I follow on Twitter talking about like this game is great, this game is amazing, this game is game of your contender. Like there were like at least 10 indie games that were extremely good. So we're in a good moment right now for indie games.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely felt very concerted. The amount of good games, and this is a really interesting kind of dynamic, right? Like if you think about big titles, right? When like Spider-Man and Mario came out on the same day, or when really big titles in the AAA space come out around the same time, uh, people are like, "Whoa, whoa, it's a crowded space!" Like oversized load, that sort of thing, right? Like there's too much to handle in it. You get sort of a like a negative connotation to it. But when there's a great like a pop or spike of really great indie titles, people are excited. Like they're authentically excited about it, and it doesn't have that same kind of negative energy, at least in my observations. So I just thought that was kind of interesting to think like, yeah, we got like 4, 5, 6 really strong indie titles in the last like 5 to 7 days, and people aren't going, well, man, that was dumb. Like, why'd they release Crow Country when Animal Well came out, or why'd they release Hades 2 early access when this came out? Everyone's like, dang, we had a lot to play. This is super exciting. I can't wait. And people are kind of like building up their playlist and their backlog of these titles. I think partially because, or maybe largely because, they're accessible in kind of these bite-sized amounts, um, as opposed to like a Dragon's Dogma 2, which is like, get comfortable, or a Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, right? Like get comfortable, get ready to sink 80 to 100 hours into this thing, which can definitely be daunting for players. So I just thought that was kind of interesting to think about. But yeah, so played some Crow Country, and then Animal Well was the game that I spent the most time with over the last few days. Superb game. I posted my thoughts on the web on the Geekly Grind. I gave it a 9 out of 10. This is a fantastic game. It's truly like a magical experience. It's a 8-bit styled puzzle platformer. You're playing as this like little brown blob dude exploring in this well, this like kind of pit of different like apex predators and other like uh, more dangerous animals, right? And it's very straightforward. Like you can move around, you can jump. There's a lot of platforming involved, and you discover these items to help you sort of navigate the broader world. But the painstaking detail in each room, the amount of secrets that you discover and continue to discover as the game goes on, the sound design, oh my God, like all of it is just 10 out of 10. The main reason why I took a point off was it because of the nature of the game, there are moments where you can get hard stuck. Like you can feel totally lost. And while the aesthetic and the sound design helps you to not feel as frustrated having necessarily like tread and retread certain rooms or like look for whatever it is that you missed to be able to move forward, it does detract from the overall experience at times. But that being said, it feels so authentically retro. Like it doesn't feel like it was made in the style of the Nintendo era. It feels like it came from the Nintendo era, and we just happen to have it now on a modern console. So um yeah, had a fantastic time with it. It's free if you have PS Plus Extra tier right now. And if you don't have that, you can get it for 22.50 on Steam and on Switch, I believe. So yeah, check out the game. It's amazing. Uh, and that's all. That's the rest of what I was up to. That was the fun part of my weekend outside of the social obligation and such. So let's go ahead and dive into our stories. We've got 5 stories today, starting with Xbox's horrible, no good, very bad week. It's been sort of a disaster for Xbox, sort of top to bottom, beginning with the shuttering of Arcane Austin, Tango Gameworks, and other studios. Tango Gameworks, of course, the publisher behind and developer behind Hi-Fi Rush, which was the sort of breakout, unexpected hit for the Xbox platform last year, in a year that was already like brimming with so many massive AAA titles. For Hi-Fi Rush to deliver the prestige and excitement for the console, arguably in a bigger way than Starfield did. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it was, it's really, really interesting. And so, yeah, they shut down Tango, and more than likely, there will be additional closures and layoffs coming. Um, and already from that bad news, it seemed like a continuous, like, rake stepping, like all week long, where
Slow rolling disaster.
a slow rolling disaster. It's like you're standing on the railroad tracks, like staring down a freight train that's moving like 10 miles an hour, and you're watching it approach for a good 30 minutes and you still don't get out of the way. So Matt Booty, head of Xbox Game Studios, had said shortly after they closed Tango Gameworks that they actually needed that we need, quote, we need smaller games that give us prestige and awards, end quote, which many found ironic and sort of tone deaf, since they just closed Tango Gameworks, which gave them a smaller game that delivered prestige. And then Sarah Bond also stumbled later in the week, where basically she was saying that success is different for every studio. So here, I'll give you the quotes here. So um, the interviewer said, quote, "I know you're not the studio's chief, but how should gamers understand that the move of closing Tango in terms of Microsoft's commitment to developing innovative and exclusive games?" And Sarah said, quote, it's always extraordinarily hard when you have to make decisions like that. I'll go back to what I was saying about the industry. And when we looked at those fundamental trends, we feel a deep responsibility to ensure that the games that we make and the devices we build, the services that we offer, are there through moments even when the industry isn't growing and when you're through a time of transition. And the news we announced earlier this week is an outcome of that and our commitment to make sure that the business is healthy for the long term. But that said, our commitment to having our own studios and working with partners to have games large and small. We're a platform where you can play GTA, but you can also play Power World, where you can play Call of Duty, and you can also play Pentiment. That doesn't change. And frankly, our commitment to Bethesda and the role that it plays is part of Xbox and everything that we do. And, you know, uh, it kind of continued from there. But she continued, one of the things I really love about the gaming industry is it's a creative art form. And it means that the situation and what success is for each game in the studio is also really unique. There's no one size fits all to it for us. And so we look at each studio and each game team, and we look at a whole variety of factors when we're faced with making decisions and trade-offs like that. But it all comes back down to our long-term commitment to the games we create, et cetera, et cetera.
So basically, she went about saying a whole lot while saying nothing. And like, I kind of want to interject here because as she's talking specifically about like the growth of like certain studios or game sales, like as she's saying this, I'm not sure if you've seen the clip or not because it was it was video of the interview.
Right, it was from Bloomberg, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you see like the director, the camera person, whoever's in charge of like displaying the shot, as she's literally saying this about growth and stuff like that, there's a massive chart behind her which shows the absolutely astronomical growth that Xbox has seen in terms of I don't know if it was sales or market share, But either way, it was just a chart on Xbox's growth, and you see it just absolutely skyrocket during the pandemic, and it's still super high. It was just like a little bit lower than last year. So when she goes up there and does that, it just looks really bad.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a few things here, right? I think on the chart, you can see in the years leading up to 2020, aka COVID, there's very little growth, and even a couple years where they kind of lost some ground, right? And then 2020 hits, everybody's inside, everybody sees the value of Game Pass because they got nothing better to do, and they see ridiculous, astronomical growth, right? In 2020 and 2021. And now, a lot of the discourse around that is like, the shareholders do not care about the broader trends of the market. They want you to deliver COVID numbers every year, right?
Yeah,
And
some of the numbers were up. They were not up enough.
yeah, exactly. And it's I mean, no, I mean, and that's the thing is like the COVID numbers were up an insane amount, like an anomalous amount, like a black swan event where you couldn't dream of being able to command that much growth in your business unless there was some sort of external factor that made everybody have to stay indoors for the better part of 12 to 18 months, like that was what drove that. And independent of that, the shareholders are like, cool, like let's make that kind of money every year. Let's keep doing that every year for growth and everything else. And it's just not sustainable. Right. And um, so yeah, that definitely was a bit of a disconnect for her to say like, hey, like we have this commitment to the long term to all these things. And then, but it's like speaking out of both sides of her mouth, right? Because if you are really interested in in a long term commitment to the games that you're publishing and making, then that long term commitment means standing by Tango GameWorks even when the industry is in a rough spot, right?
Yeah.
Like as a corporation, right? As a multi-billion-dollar corporate, multi-trillion-dollar corporation, Microsoft should be a safe haven, right? Xbox should be a harbor for the smaller companies that they've brought in, they've acquired, and kind of brought under their wing to say, okay, look, when things get tight, it's cool. You're here with us, right? Like maybe, you will still ask you to like trim heads as needed. We're going to be trimming heads too. But on the whole, we want to be able to preserve your ability to continue to make games even when the economy is bad. But instead, what's happening is like, cool, come here. And then like they just sort of like snap their neck, like it's like, shh, go to sleep, and all
Yeah,
these like
yeah, but
little
I feel like
companies. It's just crazy.
we would be good to kind of hit on the last little bit that we have in the doc and then talk about this like bigger point.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so anyways, so there were all those comments about commitments to the industry that Sarah had, and then there was a sort of reemergence of some clips from the Double Fine documentary about Psychonauts, which showed basically a bunch of the developers of Psychonauts being um, uh, you know told about being acquired and the tension kind of in the room and the looks on their faces.
Yeah, the look
um
spoke volumes. Like it was so cringe to be watching that kind of
yeah,
segment wherever Booty is or Matt Booty was around.
yeah, he tries to reassure the team post acquisition. In the process he said all the wrong things. Um and and uh, Booty said, quote, if you really want to go and run a startup, quit and go run a startup, during an exchange with the devs being able to develop ideas that could become their own indie projects. um and then he tries to walk that back and then it still sounds awful. So there's just this like, one thing after another where, you know basically it's a bad situation all around. And then instead of sort of assuaging the consumer base and other small studios that are actively making games for them right now, like Ninja Theory, for example, who's nearly done with or they're looking down the barrel of the Hellblade 2 release.
More
Right.
cringe for him. I think it's Aaron Greenberg, who's part
Mhm.
of the Xbox. He's like one of the. I don't know what specifically his role is at Xbox, but he's up there, and like he was being criticized for, well, not here specifically, but Xbox was being criticized for where's the marketing for Hellblade 2? This thing is like 10 days out, and like I've seen nothing for it. And like literally the next day he's on Twitter talking about we're about to spend this and this, and look at all these this fold out, advertising we got here, and look at this on the web page, and then look at the video we got on YouTube. And like, it just felt super weird.
Yeah, like forced, right? And so, I it's just super interesting. So, I mean, one of the talking points that emerged and that I completely agree with, um, is that, you know, Xbox leading up to the recent glut of major acquisitions that they've had, they weren't necessarily making a ton of money for Microsoft as a company, right? Like when you think of Microsoft as a corporation versus Xbox, like it's not David and Goliath. It's like, it's 10 times that. It's ridiculous. And so, they weren't necessarily making a ton of money for Microsoft, but it was a net value add because it's a great brand and they've got people coming into their ecosystem, and they get to be part of like discourse and pop culture and things like that. And so,
A
like,
place in the living room.
yeah, a place in the living room, exactly. Like their own way of being recognized. Like you might have a Mac, you might not have a PC tower, you might not run Windows, but you have your Xbox, right? You know those properties, and that might be a bit more um, more prescient than other ways that you might recognize Microsoft as a company. And so that's the way that it ran for many, 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 many years, right? And then there's this moment where Xbox is like, no, you know what? We're going to change up our strategy completely. We're going to start going out there and buying up these companies, arguably with a strategy in mind of having a really strong, software library, or building out Game Pass, and having that subscription service be the focus. Whatever the argument might be to say that this is why they went out and did these things, they went and bought Activision Blizzard, spent billions upon billions of dollars, right? And acquiring other companies along the way as well. And so now Microsoft, right, like Papa Microsoft is turning around to be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You went from like, spending like $5 to $20 a week out of, your parents, piggy bank or whatever on, snacks and stuff, to like gambling, like emptying the 401k and the savings account and going and putting it all on black, right? Or whatever. And so now they're saying, where's the profit, right? How are we going to get this money back? And Microsoft, Phil, like all the players involved, Sarah Bond, they're all feeling this immense pressure to begin delivering more profit and more revenue in ways that they couldn't even hit like in their best year. Like, and so I think that's where we're seeing this sort of scramble and this sort of panic, because they need to start making this money back, and they don't have an effective strategy in place to make the kind of money they need to make up what they've spent. It's crazy.
So I actually kind of want to circle this back to like a discussion they're having on Kind of Funny, Games Daily, and not talking about well, not Games Daily. I think it was like the last
Is it
XCast,
Gamescast? Oh
and
yeah,
they
it might have
had
been the last
Ferris
XCast. Yeah,
on and
yeah.
Gary Whitta, and like should Phil be fired?
Hmm.
And I kind of had a week to think about it, because at first I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense, but after the week that they've had, I think he should be fired because, like you were saying, Xbox in relation to Microsoft is really different. Like, of course, we view Phil Spencer's like, holy crap, it's Phil Spencer, he's CEO of Xbox, but like in the grand scheme of things, in the Microsoft corporate world, he's not that big of a deal. And if you ask me, knowing the way stuff works inside of companies that size, Satya Nadella, the CEO of like Microsoft as a whole, is not walking over to Phil and going, "Yo, Phil, go buy up all these studios and spend about 80 billion of our war chest on making Xbox bigger." It's that Phil Spencer and the rest of that team goes to Satya Nadella. They go to his office. He doesn't roll up to their office. They go to his and they say, "Hey, give us X amount of dollars to go and do this, and we promise you that we're going to give you back. That you're going to see your return on investment." And so I think that they have put themselves in a really bad position that they're in now, and that, like you said, like they're having to do all of this cutting. I think if they would have just stopped at Bethesda, they'd probably still just be, another nice thing to have for Microsoft, for the brand, for good vibes, for being relevant among young users, whatever. But the fact that they did that much spending has really put them in a tough spot. I'm guessing that they probably thought, in this era of 0% interest, it's gonna last forever. Let's go spend the money. They probably didn't expect the pushback that they got from regulators across the globe on this purchase, which really delayed how quickly they could close and start really monetizing. They had to really compromise once they did make the purchase of, like, letting Call of Duty go on all these other platforms, when it really would have benefited them to put it exclusive. Like, that's the whole point. If you have Call of Duty exclusive to Xbox and Game Pass, that would be a huge boon for them. But because they had to go through all those hoops in order to get, the approval, they should have thought of that before making that kind of purchase. So I think that Phil Spencer should be fired. He made a lot of really bad moves. And I know people like Phil Spencer, that he's a gamer and that he's, trying to do best for Xbox, but again, just really bad moves.
Yeah, it's there. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I think it definitely comes down to the amount of money that they spend and how they're going to kind of climb this steep hill of making back that money for Microsoft as a company. But the other thing too is definitely around Game Pass, right? So you and I have talked about how Game Pass is a fantastic deal.
I
It's a
love Game
great.
Pass. I have Game Pass Ultimate.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. I love Game Pass. Big fan. I love the library of games that it gives me. But what's happened is you now have this very large base of Game Pass enjoyers who have it sort of instilled in their mind now that, for example, Starfield came out day and date on Game Pass, and there are that basically every major AAA title slash exclusive on Xbox should and could and should arrive on Game Pass day and date, right? Including Call of Duty, which they cannot do. Like, if they announce that the new Call of Duty is going to be day and date on Game Pass, one of two things is going to happen. One, in the next breath, they're going to announce which tier of Game Pass you need and a price increase. Or two, if nothing changes, like, that's going to definitely impact Microsoft stock, and people are going to look around and be like, Xbox is not going to be able to make it much longer, because Call of Duty is the franchise that they need to make any kind of money, like at any decent, at any decent clip, So I'm just, the Game Pass is sort of like they've sort of painted themselves into a corner here, because now if they're not delivering the games for Game Pass, so if they said, hey, Call of Duty is not coming to Game Pass, well, now you're losing out on those Game Pass subscribers. And will you be able to make back enough on the sales alone to make up for it? Or are they just going to go to another console, or not another console, but like, are they just going to find other games to play
Yeah, because
and
like
that
if
sort
you've
of
already
thing?
paid up, like Ultimate is not inexpensive anymore. If all of a sudden I'm expected to pay what is like $18 a month, and then you also want me to tack on another 70 on top of that, no. I think that I think the path forward is probably like just Ultimate gets it, and then everyone else maybe at a discounted rate for the lower tiers of Game Pass. Because if they just say, you know what, we're not even gonna bother putting on Game Pass, there's gonna be riots in the streets, man. Like,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
changes the equation on it. The reason so many people I think got a Series S is because of Game Pass and how good of a deal it was. Like, I think that's what's really given them an opportunity to even be in third place. I think without Game Pass, there's no real reason to even have an Xbox.
Right. Yeah. Um, so anyway, I think even with the Game Pass Ultimate currently where it's at, which is, about $18 a month or whatever it is, right? Like that's like 216 a year. It's like three AAA titles, right? Or a smattering of AA titles below that, right? So therein lies more of that challenge, which is like, okay, which games are we going to bring to Game Pass, and which games can we actually release at like full price and not have the Game Pass community want to like string us up because we didn't include it for free on Game Pass, right?
Well, they've
Like,
already been doing it. I don't know if you noticed or not, but like titles like Dead Island 2 is Ultimate only. If you have the normal Game Pass, you don't get to play that title.
yeah, and that's fine. I mean, and that's fine. What I'm curious about is again, like, at what point do they increase the cost of Ultimate, right, to make up for this? Like, I think having the distinction between the standard Game Pass and the Ultimate makes sense. I'm just wondering where the threshold is for them to continue to give like the free games and which free games to the ultimate tier, or if they do like some sort of like diamond tier or something crazy. I don't know what their marketing team will
Like,
do.
and how for you personally, where do you draw the line? Like, where are you comfortable paying a month for Ultimate? Are you going like by year?
I mean, I think I would probably go by year, and I think I would cap at about maybe $20 a month, like 240, maybe 250 a year flat, right?
Okay.
Because if you think that every quarter, every 3 months, right, you get a AAA $70 game for free, you're saving some money there, right? Because that would be 280, so you're saving about $30. And then on top of that, you have the added value of all the library of games below that, like, the personas and like all those other games that you might have access to. So for me, that would be like a worthwhile. So I think they do have a little bit of wiggle room there. And I don't want to speak for all gamers, of course, I can't, but I think like logically, there's probably some wiggle room for a majority of folks. But what I'm worried about is they're not going to move in the wiggle room. They're going to like shoot for the moon, right? They're going to overcorrect way too much, or they'll keep Ultimate kind of similar, but then they'll push, the Call of Duty games and, the quadruple A games like Skull and Bones or whatever out of the Ultimate tier onto some other tier. And that's going to pan out very badly if they do that, I think.
Man, it's so rough because you're talking about wiggle room and 20, that's only $2 more than they already charge. And if you look at how the stats break down for PlayStation, which I know it's a very different platform, but still, the people who join premium versus the ones who join just like the extra, like the vast majority of the people are just on extra. Like there's a very small amount that are in that premium, and I'm guessing that it's probably similar for Game Pass. People are either on Game Pass PC or Game Pass Xbox. Not many weirdos like you and me who are like, yeah, give me the whole buffet. So I do wonder if $2 is even gonna do it. It probably will have to be like 25 a month.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it's it is interesting, like how with the PlayStation. I used to have premium for PlayStation Plus. I think I might have even talked about it on this podcast. But then they did the pricing updates, and I was like, no, it's not worth it to me because a lot of it was like the classic PS1 library that you know I was
Yeah, it
keeping it
makes no
for.
sense at the time. Even
It does.
now, that makes no
It
sense
doesn't
for
make sense
premium.
to me. It doesn't make sense because like PS Plus Extra still gives you the free games every month, and like you could get Animal Well. And I feel kind of dumb because I got Animal Well on my Steam Deck, and I could have
Yeah.
just played it for free on my PlayStation. And by the time I realized that it was for free on the PlayStation, I had already put in like 3+ hours on Animal Well, so I couldn't get a refund. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. Um, yeah, I just think it would be really interesting to see how how those numbers break down. And you mentioned it's only a couple extra bucks, but again, that's how the subscription thing works, right? Like that extra couple of bucks times millions and millions of subscribers times 12, right? Like that can help Xbox to kind of get back some of that money.
Yeah, but
Um,
I'm wondering if that
you
again,
know,
that ultimate user base is big enough to even, do what they needed to do. And
yeah.
like the most disappointing part of all this is everyone was like, yeah, maybe Call of Duty can take a year off. Maybe they can finally do new and interesting things. It's like, nope, it's just going to be the same ass Call of Duty you've been getting because that's what sells. And to do something different or try something different or give another developer a shot at it would just be too risky. It would
Hmm.
be taking them out of the the loop of making it every single year. Like it sucks, and like
Yeah.
you have to wonder, does Xbox as we know it even like can it continue? Will Satya Nadella just say, "Nah, you guys are done. There's no more hardware. We're not going to invest in this thing anymore. We're just a Call of Duty." Like it just becomes a slightly bigger Activision.
Yeah. I don't know. And I mean, we talked about that a little bit, right? In terms of Xbox moving to being a third party publisher to move away from the hardware side of things. But again, yeah, it would still be quite a steep hill for them to climb, because they're basically just going to be in purgatory trying to get back the value for buying Activision Blizzard for years to come. And to your point, they're not going to have the flexibility to try new things, explore new game design, you know, and that sort of thing. So it's really too bad. So anyway, Xbox had a
Do you see a
pretty
world
bad
where
week.
like Microsoft is like, nah, we're done. We'll sell off all the most valuable assets and like boop boop, that's it. Xbox, it's over. And it's just down to two, Sony and Nintendo.
I don't think Xbox as we know it will go away. I that's a very minimal outcome in my mind. I think they could certainly shutter hardware, um, but I could see, and they may even trim down the organization pretty significantly. But ultimately, I think they'll want to stay in the space. And so yeah, even if they become just, they are a bigger Activision Blizzard, I think the brand of Xbox will still be around. I think Game Pass will evolve, and be present. So I really don't foresee a world where it's just Sony and Nintendo in the gaming space. I think Microsoft slash Xbox remains in spirit with Game Pass. The question will be, to what extent are they able to you know make a compelling argument on the hardware side, and then also, how are things going to shake out with the structure of Game Pass with day and date new releases and that sort of thing.
The
But
only reason I even bring that up is because just knowing Microsoft and where they're at as a company and all the investments in like open AI and other AI ventures, like having all that money have been tied up in those purchases, like that's kind of holding them back. If Satya Nadella's like, yo, we need to free up cash real quick, that might be a way. Like we gotta invest more into these Azure servers, we gotta invest more into AI, and you're stopping us from doing that. That's my concern.
yeah. Maybe. Of course, it's hard to tell. It's hard to know for sure. My crystal ball, it's got a crack in it, so it's not the best. But um, regardless, it's been a bad week for Xbox, and fans of Xbox. I mean, again, I don't really subscribe to the whole console war thing myself, but I think you can empathize with folks who have been there, and have been investing in the Xbox ecosystem and are excited about Game Pass, and we're looking forward to seeing, the I know, kind of funny, kind of uses the analogy of the dominoes getting lined up for Xbox to really take off in terms of single player experiences, and kind of give Sony a run for its money in that space. And so for that all to kind of crumble, right? Like, not crumble entirely, but just to take hit after hit this week. It's rough to see. And again, like, this comes on the heels of the Helldivers 2 debacle, right, with Sony that we talked about last week. And so obviously people were up in arms and pissed off at Sony because they were fumbling the ball there. But then Microsoft or Xbox was like, You think that's bad? Hold on a second. And
Sony very happy to like, oh
oh yeah,
whoa, they forgot about us real quick.
oh yeah, oh yeah. Like the Helldivers 2 debacle has pretty much all been forgotten at this point. All but been forgotten at this point. So it's like very. I'm sure Sony PR is very happy. Anyways, onward to Nintendo. Good old Nintendo. Nintendo Switch 2 has been acknowledged by Nintendo, but it won't be at the June Direct. This is from Polygon's Nicole Carpenter. Nintendo President Shintaro Furukawa officially acknowledged Nintendo is making a Switch successor called Switch 2 by many, albeit not by Nintendo, in a message coinciding with the company's yearly financial results. Yes, we all knew the Nintendo Switch successor was coming, but Nintendo had said nothing about the console ahead of Furukawa's message. This is Furukawa, president of Nintendo. He said in a message posted to X/Twitter, "We will make an announcement about the successor to Nintendo Switch within this fiscal year. It will have been over 9 years since we announced the existence of the Nintendo Switch back in March of 2015. We will be holding a Nintendo Direct this June regarding the Nintendo Switch software lineup for the latter half of 2024, but please be aware there will be no mention of the Switch successor during that presentation." The fiscal year ended in late March, so the timeline for a Switch 2 announcement would be within a year from that time, before March 31st, 2025. Nintendo confirmed via Furukawa's announcement that Nintendo Direct is scheduled for June, but that the company won't talk about the new console there. The event will be squarely focused on games expected out in the second half of 2024. Though Nintendo said very little about the console, news has been steadily leaking out about it for the last few months. The latest news is that the Joy-Con controllers will attach with magnets instead of the original sliding rails. And according to a few reports, they'll be larger and feature more buttons, while the Switch 2 will have an 8-inch screen. Console is expected to be backwards compatible with Nintendo Switch games and peripherals. All right, Alan, what do we think? What does this mean? What's going on?
I don't want to put that energy out there, but the fact that they're like being very cagey about this, saying like, "Oh, to the end of the fiscal year, we'll announce it sometime now," which, like you said, it's March 31st, 2025. The prevailing thought is they're going to announce it like in October, get a March launch, kind of similar to the same timeline with the Switch One. But I'm not saying for sure it's going to happen. I'm far less bullish on this than I was on my original prediction of a general 2025 launch of the Switch 2. But
Sure.
I think they've definitely given themselves enough room, enough they were just vague enough to be able to just announce this thing in March and then have people have need to wait until fall of 2025. And the only reason I think that might happen is just because again they're so cheap, and like these newer chips will be going to be a lot more expensive to produce. Uh, and if they can push that off as much as they can, they 100% will. So like I'm channeling. I got tingles from Tingle himself from The Legend of Zelda that I think we might see it to fall 2025, not March 2025, the release of the Switch 2.
Yeah, you are welcome to have that feeling. I think that already pushing it out to
It's a
March,
tingle, sir. A
it's a
tingle.
tingle from Mr. Tingle. Um, I think it's too far already. Like I they'll make it, like and we'll see what software titles and lineup they have through the end of this year. I'm really curious actually, because I know that you're not super bought in on the fact that it was delayed and that initially it had like a holiday 2024 release date in the first place, but I can see that happening, and so I'm really curious what Furukawa and the Nintendo team was like. Okay, we need to give the Switch 2 some more breathing room. What do we got on the back burner? Go. Like, what can we get out, through the end of this year to keep people interested and engaged with the Switch? And yeah, so I'm really excited. I still don't know if Metroid Prime 4 is going to be the swan song of the Switch or the launch of the Switch 2 or both. I don't know. Um,
I don't know. I
but
feel like Nintendo and crew rolled up to TSMC or Samsung or whoever their foundry is and was like, it's going to cost how much to make these chips? Okay, we'll wait. We'll come back around a little bit later.
yeah, maybe. Um, but yeah, so we'll see. Regardless, I'm excited to see what the plan is through the end of the year because, like I said, it's felt a bit thin. Like Princess Peach Showtime, and we're getting to the bottom of the barrel when it comes to the Switch titles, the first party titles, and so
I mean,
it's
there was like
time
that
for
Super
new hardware.
Mario RPG remake, I think it was, and
Yeah,
also there was one with like Donkey Kong. I can't even remember the name of it, but like, they've been like they remade some of the, and they've been solid titles from what I've seen.
yeah, no, I mean, and it's not that like Paper Mario is like at the bottom of the barrel as a game itself, but like when it comes to like first party new Switch releases and that sort of thing, I think they've kind of expended the last of their energy, unless Metroid Prime 4 is coming, before the Switch 2 arrives. Um,
Nah, save it for Switch 2. Save it for Switch 2,
that's
please.
what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking. I don't think they're gonna stretch it, and I don't think it would sell very well on the main Switch. I think people would be like, "Well, the Switch 2 is close enough. I want to play it on the better performing console." Um, so anyway, we'll see. Uh, this might actually be related to, well, not related, but I can see how our next story can tie into this as well. Square Enix is aggressively pursuing a new multi platform strategy after reports of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth underperformed on PlayStation. This is from Ed Nightingale at Eurogamer. Square Enix is aggressively pursuing a multi platform strategy, including Nintendo platforms, hey, PlayStation, Xbox, and PCs. The company's new medium term business plan was shared today alongside its latest financial report and follows news of both a review of its development system and the abandonment of £112 million of in development projects. The multi platform strategy is part of a move to diversify earnings opportunities and aim to allow more customers to enjoy our titles in regards to major franchises and AAA titles, including catalog titles. Square Enix's biggest releases in recent years have been console exclusive to PlayStation, including the likes of FF7 Rebirth, Final Fantasy 16, and Forspoken, with PC releases either alongside or in the pipeline. While no specific games are identified here, it's suggested that some of the game company's biggest could make their way to Xbox in the future, or perhaps the Switch too. At the least, Square Enix's biggest game, Final Fantasy 14, made its way to Xbox recently. The strategy will maximize digital sales of new titles as well as pursue initiatives designed to win over PC users, which the company sees as a growth opportunity. The article kind of continues from there, but the long and short of it is, FF7 Rebirth and Final Fantasy 16 both sort of underperformed, and so now Square Enix is looking at multi-platform releases to help kind of pad out those sales. And I, for one, being an elder millennial and recalling the glory days of SquareSoft and Super Nintendo, welcome Square Enix to the Switch 2 catalog. I think it would be fantastic to be able to reliably get Square games in the Nintendo ecosystem, for your console on the go, and I think it'll end up with a lot more sales. I
I mean, these games are coming to PC, and you've got a Steam Deck. They're ready to go on the go.
Yeah, I mean, PC, but the PCs have been a bit of a delay, right? So I'm wondering if they go to the multi-platform strategy for like day and date and they release on the Switch the same day as they release on a PS5, you know, I or PC, I guess, yeah, if they release same day on the PC as well, like I might go with a Steam Deck or I might go with my Switch because if I have a Switch too, maybe I'll enjoy that experience better. Um,
Although I do wonder, like, is it that they did poorly, or like, are they in sort of like the Wall Street brainworms of like everything's got to be COVID numbers again, even though we're not really in that kind of environment anymore. And I also wonder, do they have the bandwidth to like make all that all for day and day for all these platforms?
yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know, but um, there's definitely, I think, the element of continuing to make a profit. I think the the gap that they've seen between how they expected FF7 Rebirth and Final Fantasy 16 to perform versus how they actually performed is less indicative of the success of the franchise or the quality of the game within the franchise and more the evolution of the industry, perhaps. Like I think they're beginning to see more and more how exclusivity doesn't necessarily have the same draw that it used to. Um, and that gamers just want to be able to play games wherever they want to play games. So yeah, I can see that as being a sort of buy-in for the companies to
And for
adopt that
context, I want to
strategy.
remind everybody that Final Fantasy VII, like the OG remake, came out literally as lockdown hit. Like, and that made that game hit so much harder. I think both for me
Hmm.
personally, and I think in the community as well in terms of sales.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the timing. Yeah, if you wanted to compare Final Fantasy VII Remake, and then also there's just sort of like the built-up energy around Remake, right? Like that game people had been waiting for decades. Like the hype around that game, from early tech demos to rumors about it to them turning into classic remakes or whatever, like into this huge project that spanned over multiple games. Um, and then for COVID to hit on top of that, right? It's like it was a perfect storm that resulted in Remake just doing gangbusters numbers. So there may be an element of that there, but I think on the whole, in recent years, in the last year and a half or so, or year and a half to 2 years, I think outside of Nintendo, right? Console exclusives just have not been delivering. Like God of War Ragnarok also, I think comparatively didn't do as well as they were hoping. Like it set records and everything, but I don't, as far as I recall, I don't remember it being like, oh my gosh, it's everything we thought it would be. Because again, there were early rumors that it was going to come to PC pretty quickly, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the broader market is shifting, and so a lot of these companies are saying, "Hey, you know what? Let's let people play this game wherever they are. Let's sell more of this software. Let's get this game into more people's hands, as opposed to maybe the strict console exclusivity." But
That or Sony buys them.
that or Sony buys them. All right. Speaking of Square Enix, some unfortunate news related to the story there. Square Enix is preparing for layoffs in US and Europe amid heavy restructuring. This is from Kat Bailey at IGN. Square Enix will be the latest publisher to undergo layoffs in the US and Europe amid extensive restructuring, VGC reports. Square Enix president Takashi Kiryu reportedly confirmed that layoffs will take place in the US and Europe during an internal town hall on Monday. IGN can confirm that the town hall took place and that workers within Square Enix are bracing for layoffs as a result. According to VGC, many of Square Enix's internal Slack channels were locked following the meeting. According to the report, Square Enix's publishing arm, IT, and any division are among the areas that will be most affected by the layoffs. The scale of the layoffs has not been confirmed. IGN has reached out to Square Enix asking for confirmation of the layoffs and an official statement. The reports of layoffs follow Square Enix's announcement of a significant reboot in the wake of a financial year that saw its profits drop by 15.8%. Square Enix finances have been under increased scrutiny as of late due to reports that FF7 Rebirth and Final Fantasy XVI failed to meet internal expectations. Square Enix is plotting a 3-year plan it hopes will spur long-term growth, including a shift to multi-platform development. They recently absorbed a $140 million content abandonment loss due to canceling multiple unannounced projects and have reportedly elevated a new group of creators, according to a Bloomberg report. Elsewhere, the games industry has continued to be rocked by layoffs and other cutbacks. Last week, Xbox shuttered Tango Gameworks and Arcane Austin, and publishers including PlayStation, EA, and Take-Two Interactive have suffered layoffs of their own. You hate to see it. Not terribly surprised though, again, especially considering the lackluster performance that Square Enix reported. So, um, yeah, it's
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
too bad. Too bad. Um, yeah, I don't really have much else to add there. It's just, it's just unfortunate. Already saw some people like on Twitter and LinkedIn just sort of saying, "Hey, it's my last day at Square Enix. I'm going off this new thing." So, again, best wishes to those who have been affected. Hope they land on their feet, and hope that Square Enix can right the ship and get back to bringing us the content and titles that we all are looking forward to. All right, last story. PlayStation names Hideki Nishino and Herman Holst as new CEOs, succeeding Jim Ryan. This is fairly warm off the press from Alex Steadman over at IGN. Sony will be replacing former PlayStation boss Jim Ryan with two CEOs, Hideaki Nishino and Herman Hulst, the company announced today. Effective June 1st, 2024, Hideaki Nishino will be CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment's Platform Business Group, and Herman Hulst will be CEO of their Studio Business Group, as revealed in a press release today. Hiroki Totoki has been serving as interim CEO in the wake of Ryan's retirement and will serve as the chairman in addition to his role as president, COO, and CFO of Sony Group Corporation. Both Hulst and Nishino will report to Totoki. Sony Interactive Entertainment is a dynamic and growing business that delivers incredible entertainment experiences through the connection of content and technology, Totoki said in a statement. These two leaders will have clear responsibilities and will manage strategic direction to ensure the focus remains on deepening engagement with existing PlayStation users and expanding experiences to new audiences. And the article kind of goes on from there. But yeah, I mean, Jim Ryan was at the company for quite some time, and so it must feel good when you leave and they have to get two people to take over for you. It's like I was working as hard as I thought I was because you had to hire two people to take over for me. But yeah, interested to see where this new era takes us. These new CEOs take us in terms of their strategies and
And I kind of feel like it's going to be
intentions.
more the same. Like I think they already have like the same kind of setup right now. It just feels more like a formalization of those positions and like those titles and their official responsibilities. So I think it's
Yeah,
just going to kind of be, steadying the ship forward and just keep doing what they're doing. To be honest.
yeah. Stick to the plan, execute the protocol as laid out. Um, I'd be interested to know like which I'd be interested to see somebody who could come in and shake the boat. Like there is a procedure and plan in place, and they're just like, nah, screw that, and they just sort of toss it out the window. I would be, I'd be very interested to see, if and when that happens. And usually when they do the hiring, if like the board of directors or whatever wants that to happen, that's the kind of person that they would look for, knowing that it's going to shake it up. So I think if that was the plan, there would probably be a lot more buzz around it. If they're like, oh, this person's crazy, like they're not even from gaming, they're from this other company, and you know,
Oh, it would make it so much worse.
yeah, yeah. So, all right, any deals to speak of? Any cool deals that you've seen lately or anything like that, Alan?
Not really. Nothing's really stood out this past week, unfortunately.
All right. Well, always keeping an eye out for some deals. And yeah, like I said earlier in the show, make sure you check out Animal Well. Make sure you check out Crow Country. There's Hades 2. There's Crypt Master. There's all kinds of amazing indies out there. So take a look at your friendly neighborhood Steam page or the indie sections of
Could you
your
imagine
favorite
if Xbox
console.
has spent like a 20th of that kind of money they spent on Activision, just like funding all of these indie games that just came out this past week, and just like made this the summer of indie games on Game Pass?
Could have been what might have been. I mean, that's what we talked about before, right? Like how, but again, from strictly like from a business perspective, like these might be critically acclaimed. They might, you know, you know, go over well, but ultimately they have to make money. But then
I
again,
think that you
if
would
you
get a
haven't
return
spent,
on that. I think offering
yeah,
people that kind of variety and speak to that many different kind of audiences, and say May is these three indies, June is these three indies, July is these three indies. That's what I mean, like the summer of indies. And these indies would have also gotten a chance to kind of shine. Like right now, there was like 10 that came out that look like absolute bangers. But like, there. I think after next week, they'll probably be mostly forgotten about. Unfortunately, I think that would have been a better situation for everyone involved. I don't even think they needed to spend a 20th of what they spent. They probably could have fund these games at like 50 million or something, and they wouldn't be getting any
yeah,
kind of pressure from Daddy Microsoft.
yeah, and that makes it easier to make the profit back too. I was just thinking, like, if they spent less
Exactly,
on the
and you
studios in
and
the
you give
first
people a
place,
reason to stay subscribed.
exactly. Listen up, Microsoft. We're giving you ideas. Okay. All right.
And a
Well,
time
we'll
machine,
go
time machine to go back to
time
unspend the
machine.
money and spend it on cool indies instead.
We have to go back. All right. Well, until next time, everybody. Thanks for listening in. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Alan.
Keep gaming.
See ya.